Today's story is I Did Not Kill My Best Friend, It Was the Tiny Clowns by Jackson Arthur. My name is Mitt Gibson. I want to say that right away because a lot of people will know that name, and I want to begin by being totally honest. Most of you know what I have done, or at least you know what has been claimed. But I have not done what they claim. I am not the monster that you believe me to be, and I know that sounds like everyone else sitting in prison spouting off claims of innocence, but I am telling you the truth. I am not a liar. I have never lied about that night, and I won't start now. None of what I am about to tell you will be lies. You need to understand that. You think that you know me, but you don't. You don't. I have tried to tell my story a million times, but no one wants to listen. The media doesn't want to report it. The police don't want to hear it. They want to cage the monster and throw away the key. When no one was looking, I found a way to get my story onto the internet. I have found a way to speak directly to the people, uncut and unedited. Maybe I'm screaming into the wind. Maybe. But I'm desperate to be free of that night. All I need is for someone out there, somewhere, to read this and believe me. My only hope in writing this is that someone will hear my side of the story and it will ring a bell or hit a nerve because they have experienced something similar. I can't be the only one. I just can't be. It happened a little over 2 years ago. I remember that night as being normal, boring. I'm not going to paint you a detailed picture of the weather or how the moonlight caused the icicles to twinkle because I don't remember what the weather was like that night. It wasn't a detail that's stuck in my brain. It was winter in Ohio, which means that it was probably cold and that there might have been some snow on the ground. Beyond that, I don't know. It was a Wednesday. Like I said, just normal and boring. I was 19 at the time and living in my parents' basement, which had been turned into a little makeshift apartment. I had my own toilet, stove, and mini fridge, a short black futon, and a basic TV too. Not even a flat screen. One of those ancient heavy-ass antiques that didn't even connect to Wi-Fi. It was okay though. I was able to play my Xbox on it. I didn't need anything else at the time. Like that singing bear from the kids' movies. I had the bare necessities in life. Now, I know that's a little cliche. A grown man living in his parents' basement. But I was going to college at Kent State and my folks were trying to help me out by giving me a roof and a bed. They didn't want me to have to worry about anything but my schoolwork, so I didn't have to have a job either. Doing well in school was the most important thing, they always told me. They were great parents, the best. None of what happened was their fault. They didn't do anything wrong, and they don't deserve what the people in the news have been saying about them. My dad had a stroke about a year ago. The stress of everything was just too much on him. He lived, thank God, and my mom says that he's doing better every day. He gets around just fine now, I guess, and his speech is starting to get back to normal. Part of me wishes that he would start visiting me again. Seeing his face would be amazing, but I get it. Another stroke might kill him. If I had to choose, I'd rather have him alive and in the world than dead and in the ground. I need to know that he's out there somewhere, even if I don't get to see him. I just hope that he hasn't lost faith in me. But maybe he has. At this point, I couldn't really blame him. I just want him to know that I love him, and I'm sorry for everything. My life wasn't the only one destroyed. And I will never forget the date when everything I loved died. January 12th. And I was in between semesters, which was a much-deserved period of downtime for me. Finals had been more of a nightmare than usual, and I was wiped out. All I wanted to do was hang out at home and relax. I didn't want to look at another textbook or see another classroom until I had no other choice. I needed to unwind and rest up before the next semester started in a couple of weeks. I called up my friend Micah. Micah had been my best friend for most of my life. I vaguely remember the first time I met Micah, but my mom liked to tell the story. I've heard it so many times that I'm not sure if I actually remember it or not. It had been the first day of second grade, I guess. The kids were allowed to bring a single toy to school each day and play with it during recess. My mom had bought me a brand new little fire truck specifically for that first day. But Micah's mom must have forgotten to put something in his book bag, and he wanted to play with mine. It was my toy though, and I wasn't going to share. We got into a fight underneath the monkey bars, and the recess teacher had to break us up. Both our mothers had to come pick us up early from school. There weren't any black eyes or bloody noses. We were just two bad little boys rolling around in the dirt. Our moms were so mad that day, but they became friends because of it too. So, win-win, I guess. I still smile whenever I think about it. When I called Micah that night, I told him to bring his ass over and grab a pizza on the way. I already had Doritos and Funyuns and Mountain Dew. We could get high, eat greasy food, and binge on some Impractical Jokers on my Xbox. I could still hear him stomping down the basement steps when he finally got there. He always heavily strutted down those stairs for some reason. I think he did it on purpose, but I never knew for sure why. He had to make as much noise as possible, had to make sure everyone in the house knew that he was around. Micah had always been a goofy dude and did weird random things for no reason. He must have found it funny to make a lot of racket on my steps. Who knows? As long as he could make himself laugh, nothing else mattered. I could still picture his face. His wide grin as he presented to me a large pepperoni pizza with extra cheese, as if he had made it himself. His long black hair pulled back in its usual loose ponytail. The naturally tanned skin of his face seemed flustered, sweaty, as if coming down into my basement had been the equivalent to running a marathon. Micah had always been happy, upbeat, no matter the situation. And that is the image of him I have tried like hell to hold on to. That is how I want to remember my friend. Full of life. I motioned with my hands for Micah to put the pizza on the stove and have a seat next to me on the futon, which at that moment had been transformed into a couch. On his way over to me, he made the detour to grab a cold can of Mountain Dew from the fridge. He then sat down, cracked open the can, and as he was taking a long draw from his drink, I asked, "Are you ready to get high?" "Always," he replied after swallowing his pop. He took another giant gulp, nearly draining it, before placing the can on top of my wooden coffee table. "Now, I'm ready to relax," I told him. "I'm ready to get so relaxed that I become a marshmallow and melt right into the fabric of this futon." "Well then," he said, "break it out and let's get going." "Me?" I asked him. "You didn't bring any?" "No," he replied. "You don't have any?" "No." "Town's been dry lately," Micah mumbled. We both shook our heads. It never crossed my mind that Micah would not have anything. He usually had something on him, or at least he would have grabbed something before heading over to my underground lair. He should have known that the chances I had any bud were normally slim. My friend was a stoner at heart, but I was never the type of person to get high every day. I only smoked on rare occasions, like whenever a hard exam or difficult paper was in my rear view, and I needed to decompress the frustration. I remember Micah's face lighting up, his back perked up, and I knew that my friend had an idea. "I do have something," he told me. When he saw me shaking my head again, he quickly blurted, "Just hear me out. I know that you only smoke, but, my man, I got something better. Maybe not better, but different." I think that I grumbled something like, "What is it?" "Check it out," he said as he reached into the front pocket of his sweatpants. It took almost a minute of rummaging in his pocket before he found what he wanted. When he pulled his hands free, it didn't look like he was holding anything. He then showed me his palm, and I saw what at first appeared to be two miniature stamps. Clowns, man. Clowns? I didn't know what he was talking about. I don't recall picking one up from his palm, but I must have, because the next thing that I knew, I was holding one of the pieces of paper directly in front of my face. It was so tiny between my fingers. As I looked closer, the odd word made more sense. Clowns. Printed across one side of the paper square was the face of a cartoon clown. And it was a vintage clown, like something from the 1950s. Poofy yellow hair beneath a green top hat, ovals of white makeup that wrapped around the mouth and both eyes, a wide grin that was both joyous and sad at the same time, and a giant red nose, of course. "Where the hell did you get this?" I asked him. "I'm sorry, sir," Micah replied. "I never divulge my sources to the police." He leaned in closer and spoke to my chest, as if I was wearing a listening device. "I don't do drugs. Drugs are illegal and they are bad." "Whatever," I said. "Why are you just carrying this around with you, and since when do you do acid?" "Since now," he told me. "My cousin Jason told me that acid is like a key that opens up the universe. It removes the boundaries between you and God Almighty. Everything is revealed. You find the answers to all of the hows and whys." Bullshit. "And I want to share that key with my best friend," he told me. "And if we don't like it, we never do it again." "Jason gave you this? That dude is shady and I want nothing to do with it if it comes from him." "I got it from somewhere," he told me. "Don't worry, just trust me. Your semester is over, we ain't got shit to do. How about we escape reality for a bit, yeah?" I always had one rule. I never did anything harder than weed. And looking back, I picked the wrong time to break my own rule. The way that the small square dissolved in my tongue made me question whether it had actually been real paper or something else. In less than 3 seconds, it had entirely disappeared. I immediately regretted taking it, but it was too late. The train had left the station, and the only thing left to do was strap in and put on my helmet. I'm not sure how long we sat there and waited, but just when I was ready to tell Micah that he must have been ripped off, I felt a tingle rise from the floor of my basement and enter into my feet. It wasn't like the pins and needles of a waking limb, but more like an overload of sensations. As the tingle began to slowly spread upward to the rest of my body, I will have to admit that I kind of liked how it felt. It was like my body was coming alive for the first time ever, and it was about to become wide open as the world entered into me. Now, I know it doesn't make sense, but everything that I'm going to say will. "Are you feeling that too?" Micah asked me. He wasn't looking at me, but staring off toward nothing in particular. He couldn't see me, but I nodded anyway. Suddenly, the real world, the one trapped beneath the reality we know, revealed itself to me. Color. I never knew color until that moment, not really. What I had always believed to be color was nothing more than various shades of gray compared to what I started seeing. Everything around me became vibrant and pulsating. Even the dullest part of my basement became amazing to look at. Not only were the colors more vivid than anything I had assumed possible, but they also pulsated and moved in waves that rose and fell. It was kind of like breathing. Everything around me seemed to be alive, like I had unexpectedly found myself as part of a Disney movie, one where even the candlesticks and salt shakers were living things. I turned to Micah and I could see layers of color covering his body like a beautiful aura. And that was when I started laughing. No, that's actually not accurate. I began to chuckle like a madman and I couldn't stop for several minutes. Micah joined my laughing fit by having one of his own. We laughed and laughed and laughed until my throat was dry, my eyes were filled with tears, and my head began to pound. I honestly think we both would have laughed ourselves to death if not for the music. At first it was low, and seemed to be coming from several points around me. It was impossible at first to pinpoint the source. I quickly snatched my TV remote and muted the volume to make sure it wasn't coming from the show I was watching. The voice of the actors on the screen were silenced, but the music became louder. Now, when I was 10 years old, my parents and I took a trip to Youngstown to see the Barnum and Bailey Circus. It was my one and only trip to see the circus, and it was magical for my young mind. The entire show was based around the imagery of dragons. My father complained that he had to pay $30 for a stuffed blue dragon, but I had to have it. Until that horrific night, I still had that damned blue dragon. My parents might still have it somewhere. But I will always remember going to the circus, and I will always remember the lions and the tigers, the motorcycle acts, the high-flying stunts, the tricks with the dogs and cats, and especially the silly clowns. There had been a whole crew of multi-colored clowns doing all kinds of crazy and funny things, and I will never forget the music that played when the clowns showed up. It was the typical circus song that everyone knows. That night in my basement, I began to hear that exact same music. Entry of the Gladiators. I googled it because it has been stuck in my head every single day since. Sounds of rustling and scratching somehow drew my attention away from this impossible music. My coffee table was a single solid piece of wood that sat directly on the concrete floor, with a hollow space inside of it for storage that could be accessed by opening the top. Something was moving around on the floor on the other side of it. From where Micah and I sat, we couldn't see what it was, but we could hear its movement plain as day. A rat must have gotten in again, I figured. But then a pair of hands popped up from behind the coffee table. They were tiny and wearing flawlessly clean white gloves. I nearly jumped through my skin at the impossible sight, and then when two more pairs of hands appeared, both new pairs indistinguishable from the first, I mentally began to freak out. I watched in shock as all three sets of hands reached up to grab hold of the far side of the coffee table. I kept telling myself that what I was seeing was not real. It was the acid. That was just my luck, you know. It was the first time and I was having a bad trip. I repeated this over and over and over in my head as I watched in stunned silence as three tiny clowns, barely over 6 inches tall, pulled themselves up and on top of my coffee table. They were 3 duplicates of the same cartoon clown that had been printed on the miniature stamp that I had ingested. Yellow hair, green top hat, white makeup, and of course a big red nose. The piece of acid paper had only shown me the clown's face, but now I could see the rest. The clothing, other than the white gloves I had mentioned, was a multicolored jumpsuit that was covered in white polka dots and a set of oversized green shoes. The many colors vibrated from the clowns, as if screaming in my face. Not real, not real, not real, but then my heart nearly stopped when I heard Micah ask me, "Do you see them too?" How were we having the same hallucination? I didn't know how to respond to Micah's question. I simply watched in bewildered silence as the 3 strange clowns gathered on my coffee table. My coffee table was slightly cluttered, but there was enough room at the center for the trio to stand. For what felt like forever, the clowns stood still and stared up at Micah and me. Suddenly, the music that I had nearly forgotten about erupted in a loud clash and crescendo. That was when the clowns began to do tricks. 2 of the 3 clowns began to do a silly dance, arms and feet flying in all directions. The same 2 occasionally added a sloppy tumble or cartwheel to change up the routine. It was the most bizarre and unnerving thing I have ever seen. The 3rd clown stood between the 2 dancing ones, positioned at the center of the act. I don't recall seeing that 3rd clown retrieve balls from anywhere, but as if out of nowhere, he began to juggle 4 different colored balls. Every time the center clown caught and then returned a ball into the air, it was a different neon color. "This LSD is crazy," Micah mumbled. The juggling became faster and faster until it was a bountiful blur of color that melted my senses into a pile of sludge. It was hypnotizing. As I sat there and watched the balls go round and round, I felt the tingling that had filled my body suddenly fall away, pouring back downward and into the concrete floor. Along with the sensation, my ability to move left me as well. My muscles tightened, and when I tried to make the simplest movement, nothing happened. I was frozen in place. And then, without warning, the dancing stopped and all the balls were gone. Again, all three clowns stood still and stared up at Micah and me. Entry of the Gladiator still playing in the background like the soundtrack of The Mentally Insane. I don't know how long they stood and stared, but it felt like hours. Sitting on the left side of my coffee table was a white ceramic plate that I had used a couple of days before for the strip steak and baked potatoes that my mother had cooked. To be honest, it still sat there because I had been too lazy to return it to the upstairs kitchen to be washed. The plate had long been licked clean, but it still held my fork and knife. The knife wasn't a normal steak knife. I think that it was closer to a paring knife, a thin blade with a short black handle. The central clown turned its head and looked at the knife, moving much faster than I had expected. The center clown went over and grabbed the knife from the plate, while the other two remained like statues. Ever the creepy showman, the center clown revealed the knife to his audience, and like it was a sharp and deadly show prop. The center clown then plunged the tip of the knife through the side of Micah's Mountain Dew can, as if to show us how sharp it was, and as if we didn't already know. The pop can had been nearly empty and the stabbing didn't draw any liquid. Removing the sharp knife from the can, the center clown began a sword-swallowing routine. He shoved the knife down his throat several times, deeper down each time until the entire blade was inside of his neck. After the final swallow, he pulled the knife free and bowed. As if given a cue that I hadn't seen, the clown on the right rushed toward Micah and leapt across from the coffee table to Micah's lap. Not even a second behind him, the left clown followed behind. The first clown on Micah's lap went down on his hands and knees, allowing the following clown to get on his back. The following clown climbed onto the first clown's back and then balanced itself while also getting down on its hands and knees. They were making a step stool, I realized. The central clown charged and leapt into Micah's lap. He swiftly went up the backs of the other two clowns, the paring knife still in hand. I knew what was coming. It had been obvious, but I could not move. I couldn't even turn my head all the way toward Micah, but I could see what was happening from the corner of my vision. I watched helplessly as the paring knife was shoved into Micah's left eye. I swear I heard a wet pop as the blade went in. I swear my friend wanted to scream. I could see a thick vein bulging in his neck, but the scream was never released. In a single motion, the central clown pulled the blade free of Micah's eye and then thrust it deep into Micah's neck, in the exact spot of that bulging vein. Without removing the knife, the three clowns returned to the surface of my coffee table. All three of the bastards bowed, their show at its end, and then they were gone. 1 second they were there bowing, and then the next second they were not. Wherever they returned to, they also took their theme music with them. The colors began to dull, and I felt the stiffness leaving my muscles. When the use of my body returned to me, that was when I really messed up. That was the point when I needed to use my brain and act smart, but I didn't. I should have called for help right then, either screaming for my parents or getting on my cell phone to call an ambulance, but I didn't. My mind was still messed up, and at the sight of my best friend unconscious from the pain by that point, I panicked. I pulled the knife blade out of Micah's neck. The blood poured so fast, it was an instant crimson waterfall. That was when I finally began to scream, and I had never screamed so loud. I don't fully remember everything that happened immediately after that. My parents heard my screams and came flying down into the basement. I think that I might have still been holding the knife when they found me. The medics showed up first, but Micah had bled out too fast for them to do anything. The cop showed up not long after the ambulance. I remember feeling the metal of the handcuffs, and I remember the blinding sea of flashing lights when they put me in the police cruiser. But just like the juggling balls, it was all a blur of motion and color. I am sure that I tried to tell them about the clowns right away, but they weren't listening. They didn't believe me. Not that night or any night since. They tested Micah's and my blood, and it was easy to find the acid. And I was the only other person in the basement, so obviously I had to have done it. I mean, who else could have, right? Open and shut case. They labeled the murder as a drug-induced psychosis. According to the experts, what Micah and I took was a normal, street-level hallucinogen. But I know the truth, and someone out there has to know it too. Micah had to have gotten that LSD from somewhere, which means that there is someone else out there that knows about it. So please, I am begging you, if you have seen the clown acid or have seen the clowns, tell someone. Help me, please. Just come forward. I need you to save me. I bet you never thought I would have a story on my channel about LSD and tiny clowns killing people, did you? Guess what? I didn't either, until I read the story. And, Jackson Arthur, my man, my friend, damn. Love it. Alright guys, hope you liked that story. I did. I thought it was awesome. It's just one of those stories where just like, what? Was it really clowns? Did he have a psychotic breakdown because of the acid? You know, but anyway, great story, man. If you guys did enjoy it and would like more content like this, or content that is so vastly different it's like comparing tortillas to dry erase markers, please consider joining the Nevermore. To join the Nevermore, all you have to do is hit that little subscribe button and the bell icon next to it, and that makes you part of the Nevermore. You can support the Nevermore's growth by doing things like joining me on Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, submitting a story to me if you have one, or you can also support me on Ko-fi or Patreon. Every one of those is optional, and every single one is greatly appreciated. All that said, friends, I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I hope you're doing well, and staying safe out there. I know I've said it before, but everything just still feels crazy. Stay safe, stay sane. I know it's not easy, but just know whatever is challenging you in life, you got this, I promise. You know, you got this. You can overcome it. And it's not easy, but you can do it, I promise. Anyway. Alright, friends. Hope to see you in the next video, but until then, much love, and sleep well.